In a single week, the U.S. Space Force awarded SpaceX more than $6 billion in contracts tied to two critical missions. The first is a military space data network designed to move information across future battlefields. The second is a space-based surveillance system intended to track aircraft and airborne threats from orbit. At first glance, these may look like ordinary defense contracts, but together they reveal something much bigger. The United States is steadily moving key military capabilities into space, and SpaceX is becoming one of the companies helping to build that future. What makes this story particularly interesting is that SpaceX was never created as a defense company. Its original mission was to reduce the cost of reaching space and eventually make life multiplanetary. Yet by 2026, many of the technologies developed for that mission are finding an entirely different role, one that could shape the future of American military power. For most of modern history, military power was measured in physical assets: more tanks, more aircraft, more ships, more firepower. But modern warfare is increasingly becoming a competition of information. Who can detect a target first? Who can process information faster? Who can distribute that information across thousands of miles in seconds? And who can make decisions before their opponent even understands what is happening? In many situations, seeing first can be more important than shooting first. A missile cannot hit a target that nobody can find. A fighter jet cannot engage a threat it cannot see. And an army cannot respond effectively if critical information arrives too late. Information has become a weapon of its own, which means the systems that collect, transmit, and process information are becoming just as important as the weapons themselves. For decades, space was largely viewed as a supporting domain. Satellites helped with navigation, weather forecasting, telecommunications, and intelligence gathering. But increasingly, military planners are beginning to view space differently, not simply as a place that supports military operations, but as an essential part of military operations themselves. Recent conflicts have highlighted just how dependent modern forces have become on information, whether it is tracking threats, coordinating forces across large distances, or maintaining communication when traditional infrastructure is disrupted. Access to reliable data has become a critical advantage. One of the clearest examples came from Starlink. Originally developed as a commercial satellite internet network, Starlink was designed to provide connectivity around the world. Its primary purpose was civilian, but real-world events demonstrated that the same technology could also prove valuable in far more demanding environments. During the conflict in Ukraine, Starlink became one of the most visible examples of how a large satellite constellation could continue providing connectivity even when traditional infrastructure was under severe pressure. For many military planners, the lesson extended far beyond Ukraine itself. It demonstrated that a distributed satellite network could provide resilience, flexibility, and global coverage in ways that traditional systems often struggle to match. And Ukraine was only one example. Recent missile exchanges and military tensions across the Middle East have reinforced a similar reality. Modern threats can travel hundreds or even thousands of kilometers in a matter of minutes. Detecting them quickly, sharing information rapidly, and coordinating responses across large regions has become increasingly important. As a result, governments are paying far more attention to the infrastructure operating above the battlefield. Perhaps the clearest sign of this shift is that satellite networks are no longer viewed solely as commercial services. They are increasingly being treated as strategic assets. And that helps explain why SpaceX is attracting so much attention from defense planners, because long before receiving these new military contracts, the company had already built something that many governments now consider incredibly valuable: a large-scale, resilient space-based network operating on a global scale. And that may be one of the reasons SpaceX finds itself at the center of this new era of military space infrastructure. For decades, the United States relied heavily on aircraft like the E-3 Sentry AWACS. These aircraft are often described as flying command centers. Their powerful radar systems can monitor enormous areas of airspace and provide critical information to friendly forces. For years, they were among the most valuable assets in any military operation. But warfare is evolving. Potential adversaries are developing longer-range missiles, more sophisticated radar systems, advanced electronic warfare capabilities, and increasingly capable anti-access strategies. The problem is simple. What happens when the enemy can see the eye itself? Large surveillance aircraft are incredibly useful, but they are also large, expensive, and potentially vulnerable. And that has led American military planners to explore a different idea. What if some of those capabilities could move into space? This is where the recent Space Force contracts become important. One of the new programs focuses on what is known as space-based air-moving target indication. The name sounds complicated, but the concept is surprisingly straightforward. Imagine replacing a small number of airborne surveillance aircraft with a large constellation of satellites. Instead of watching from the sky, they watch from orbit, instead of monitoring one region. They can potentially monitor enormous areas across the globe. The goal is not necessarily to eliminate traditional surveillance aircraft. Rather, it is to create a more resilient network where information comes from many different sources. Because destroying one aircraft is possible, but tracking and neutralizing hundreds of satellites is a much more complicated challenge. The vision is clear: America wants more eyes in space. But there is a second problem. Seeing a target is only half the battle. The information must reach the people who need it, fast. Imagine the human body. The eyes detect information, but without nerves, the brain never receives the signal, and without muscles, the body cannot react. Modern military networks work in a similar way. Sensors detect threats. Networks move information. Command systems process it. Weapons respond. This is where SpaceX's second major contract becomes significant. The company is helping build a space-based data network designed to move information between military sensors and operational units. In simple terms, SpaceX is not only helping to build the eyes, it is helping to build the nervous system, the infrastructure that allows information to flow across the entire network. This raises another question. Why SpaceX? Why not one of the traditional defense contractors? Part of the answer lies in what SpaceX has become over the past 2 decades. Most defense companies specialize in specific products: aircraft, missiles, radars. SpaceX operates differently. It launches rockets. It manufactures satellites. It operates one of the largest satellite constellations ever created. And it has developed a production system capable of building and deploying hardware at a scale that was once difficult to imagine. Traditional defense contractors often think in terms of dozens of systems. SpaceX thinks in terms of thousands. That difference matters, because the future military architecture envisioned by the United States depends heavily on large-scale networks rather than a small number of extremely valuable platforms. In many ways, traditional defense companies build platforms. SpaceX increasingly helps build the network connecting those platforms together. And perhaps that is the most interesting part of this entire story. When Elon Musk founded SpaceX in 2002, many people thought the idea was unrealistic. A private company building rockets, competing with established aerospace giants talking about Mars when reaching orbit itself seemed difficult to many observers. It sounded absurd. The original vision was not military dominance. The original vision was lowering the cost of access to space, eventually making humanity a multi-planetary species, yet something unexpected happened along the way. To pursue those goals, SpaceX built reusable rockets, it built launch infrastructure, it built satellite manufacturing capabilities, it built Starlink, it built one of the most extensive space-based communications systems ever deployed. None of those technologies were created specifically to fight wars, but as the world changed, many of them became strategically valuable. Not because SpaceX necessarily planned it that way, but because history moved in a direction where those capabilities suddenly mattered a lot.